Well, good day, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us on Up and to the Right. And each and every week we have somebody on that is very special to me, and this is no exception. I'm so glad to have with me today Eli Garcia from Lawton, Oklahoma. And Eli, can you tell us a little bit about who you are so that our audience can get to know you a little better?
Yeah, it's good to be here, Pastor Rodney. So Eli Garcia, and let's see here, where to start? So I am 33 years old. We have 4 kids, my wife Sheridan and I, and we planted a church a little over 2 years ago. Yeah.
So 2 years ago, planted a church.
Yep, planted a church here in Lawton, Oklahoma. Prior to this, was a police officer for almost 10 years, and during that time, I just got involved in just helping in youth ministry and kids ministry, and actually helped my wife for a little bit in nursery ministry, and one thing would lead to the next, and would just become the youth pastor, and eventually would just it just had an amazing time there, and then would transition out of that into an executive pastor role, and so 2 years ago was able to plant a church here in Lawton, and just really seeing some amazing things and just what God's done in really just a short time.
So, if I understand correctly, you were a police officer for about 10 years. And during that time frame, you were serving in the local church. Even as a youth pastor, you were still working as an officer, correct?
Yep, I was. So I would do Wednesday nights, and then I would work a midnight shift. So with just 9:30 I had to be at work. And so I'd just bring my uniform to church, and so just would preach and hang out with the students, and then after they had all left, I'd get dressed in my uniform and I'd go work a 10-hour shift. So did that for about 4 or 5 years, and it was just a wild season.
That is so great. I love to hear those stories. I know that it's just really neat to see what God has done in your life and Sheridan's life and your family. Now, you mentioned you have 4 children. What are their ages?
So a 10, it's Ava, our firstborn, 8, Axel, 5, Danny, and 4, Demi. And so very good.
Okay. Right. Yeah, you have your hands full. So in the middle of being a police officer, serving and volunteering in the local church, and then you have this call of God on your heart to plant a church, you and Sheridan. Tell us about how that came to pass, how that happened.
Yeah, so I always grew up in church and was always just told, you're supposed to do something in church, supposed to help. But I think growing up in it, 4 generations of pastors, I just had just made some internal decisions. I wasn't going to ever be a pastor and or kind of anything in the ministry, but I would marry a pastor's daughter who was very involved in the local church, and just from nursery all the way up, and eventually just led all of next generation. And so as she's running nursery is whenever I had just gotten hired on the police department. And so really in that season, early on in our marriage, I just kind of made my job my God, and and I kind of try to justify it by, well, I'm providing for my family, and really just kind of just running from church. And but she just stayed consistent and just loved me, always prayed for me. I don't remember her ever really, being upset with me. Obviously she would challenge me, are you going to church today? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go work overtime. But she would just invite me to a youth conference. And she said, the way she got me to go was, she said that they needed some male chaperones. And so that there was going to be a group of boys that weren't going to be able to go if she couldn't get another adult male to go with them. And so after her asking me several times, I finally said, okay, I'm tired of hearing you nag me about it. I'll go with you. And so I decided to go. And whenever I went down there, I had up until this point never experienced a life-giving culture as far as church. And so I just remember thinking in my head, like, man, why are these people why are they so excited to see me? Why are they so happy? And why are they all smiling? And I hadn't experienced this in church. The way I had experienced church was that it was, you go, and it was almost like something you had to endure. And so I go to this experience and I'm just like, wow, these people, I'm thinking it's like, this is fake. Why are these people so happy? And then I'd never experienced worship like this. I'd never felt the presence of God like this. And I just remember sitting there and seeing 4,000 students with their hands raised and just feeling just this sense of like overwhelming peace and like nothing else. I was almost like time stopped in this moment. And I just remember thinking to myself, God, if this is church, I can be a part of it. And I remember we were driving back on the bus and I was driving the van. There was about 8 kids. And I remember we're driving back and I just told those students, I was like, you guys need something like that. And they were like, yeah, we do, man, it'd be awesome. And one of the kids said, well, who's going to do it? And another kid said, well, Eli can do it. I said, no, I can't do it. And they kept saying, yeah, you should do it. And I'm like, no, my schedule, not, I don't know how to preach. I don't know how to talk in front of people. In fact, whenever I get really nervous, I stutter. And I grew up going to speech class. And but they kept saying, you can do it. And then I remember thinking, well, I grew up in church, hearing all the stories and 4 generations of preachers. And I'm like, I know all the Bible stories. So maybe I can do this. And I just kind of thought, this is crazy. But on the drive back home, I just felt like this call, like, man, maybe I can. I would come back, I would sit down with my pastor, and I would tell him, I think I want to do this. And he told me, he said, I've been waiting for you. And so we just kind of put together a game plan, and we didn't have anybody leading youth ministry at the time. And so that was July, and I would switch my schedule to a midnight schedule so I could do Wednesdays. And I knew I would have to go to work after, but I thought I could, let's do this. And I just felt that call. And so that's July. By October, I switched schedules and we started youth ministry. Had 8 kids there the first night. And by February, 4 months later, we were running over 200 students and had no idea what was going on. And so at that time, we outgrew the adult ministry. And so we had to transition from our small little section of our room, and we took over the main auditorium on a Wednesday night, and it was just wild. Kids just kept coming. We actually hired the Lawton Police Department. They would come and do off-duty security for us, and it was amazing. It was just crazy to see the growth. I knew nothing about leadership. I knew nothing about structures and building teams, and we were just shooting from the hip, and it was amazing. So.
And I guess shooting from the hip is an appropriate term for you. If anybody can say it as a preacher, you can. Yeah. Because you're a law officer at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so. Let me just ask you this: were you packing sometimes when you're in the pulpit?
Every time.
Every week.
Yeah, every week.
Hey, man, I need to step up my game then.
Oh, goodness.
Well, that is incredible, going from just a handful of students to literally over 200 showing up to worship Jesus. That's just incredible. But I know you got an incredible wife that is your partner in ministry, and she actually leads a lot of the church and what happens. And so you were blessed to obviously have her. And tell me a little bit about how Sheraton, how her role in the church and what she is doing now.
Yeah, so she is very administrative, and she can build teams, and she knows how to just call things out of people. And she just sees greatness in people, and she just knows how to pull it out of them. And the way I explain it is I love people, love high-fiving people, love talking to people. And on the other end of it with her, she's just a finisher. She just knows, I can say, hey, like, I see this happening, and this is how some things I'm thinking. And she just sees it, and she can just run with it and just finish it. And just as far as communicating with people, with teams and organization, I mean, she's just amazing. And I remember early on, I heard somebody was just talking about there's a lot of great preachers. There's a lot of, you can drive through the city and there's a lot of, just great preachers, but really it's about like structure and organizations and the systems you put in place and putting the right people in place. And that's really what she is. She's like that half of the house in a sense, is just structures and organization placing people. And so really just such a gift. I remember one time we were going to take some students. It was like maybe it was like maybe the next year we were going to student conference, and we were going back to that same one. And we had over 50 students going with us, and maybe like 12, 13 adults. And so like 65 people going all together. And we had been talking about it for about 4 weeks, and she raised a ton of money as far as just getting kids to be able to go, just being able to sponsor them. And I remember the day I show up to the church that we're getting ready to leave, and there's these 2 charter buses sitting outside, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got charter buses. This is amazing. I'm like, where did we get these? And she's like, I ordered them, 2 months ago. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And all these kids, and she's got all these check sheets and everything. And then I remember on the way there, halfway there, we were going to a Whataburger. We were going to stop at a Whataburger for lunch. And so these 2 charter buses with 65 people, we show up at this Whataburger. And when we get there, she said, if you ordered a burger, you're in this line. If you ordered chicken, you're in this line. And all of our food was ready. There was all the cups, all the food, everything. I'd never seen so many Whataburger employees in my life. And I'm like, how in the world did this happen? And she said, I sent this list out, and all the kids ordered. And I called, and 30 minutes out, and told them, hey, we're almost there. And it was amazing. It was 3.5 days, and it was like that. Every restaurant we went to, we would walk in, and they had our orders ready. And if it was me, I would have just showed up the day of. It's time to go to camp, and their parents would be like, how y'all getting there? And I'd be like, I don't know. And so that's kind of how I explain it, is she's the organization to the house.
That's so great. That's so great. Wow. That's why you guys make a dynamic duo. That's for sure. And so tell me a little bit about how you got from, you went police officer full-time to a volunteer serving in the church a little bit, to literally youth pastor, but still running, still a full-time job as a police officer, to making that step to, okay, God is calling me to plant a church. Well, give us a little bit of feel on what that was like, and that journey to just like literally laying it all down and say, okay, I'm going to walk away from a job to plant a church.
Yeah. I can remember ever since I was in 3rd grade, my dream was to be a police officer. And so my whole life, that's what I was working towards, and just knew that's what I wanted to do. And just anytime anybody asked me, that's what I told them, I'm going to be a police officer. And so really I felt like I was like living my dream. And so it was a year after I started helping out in student ministry, just volunteering, not getting paid, but I was putting in just a lot of hours and just loved it. I mean, I felt like I just started like really in life, like to come alive. And so about a year after I started that, my pastor would take me to a pastor's conference, and there was maybe about 30 pastors there. And I feel like growing up in church, I always heard the Bible stories, and I heard this preacher that was talking about Elijah and Elisha, and he was given the illustration whenever I always get him up. Elijah was the one that would be anointed the next prophet, and but he was given that example. He was reading that passage of scripture and telling the story, and how Elijah, he had 12 yoked ox and the yoke and everything, and he's out there just plowing, and Elisha comes by and he throws the cloak on him, and whenever he does, he's like, whoa, to anoint him as the next prophet. And he says, hold on, he's like, can I at least tell my family goodbye? He's like, what does that got to do with me? Just remember what's been done to you. And the Bible says he just kept on walking. And then the Bible would tell us that night he would take the 12 ox and he would butcher them in the yoke, and he would make this fire, and it was almost like this going away party. But the way he explained it was that he would have had a good life. He would have been wealthy, taking over the dad's farming business, and he explained what the ox would have cost in that day and age, and that he would have had a great life. But in that moment, he sacrifices his dream, his future, for the future that God would have for him. And he left everything and just followed the man of God. I just felt like in this moment that God just hit me. And he said, will you leave your dream for the dream that I have for you? And I remember I'm just crying, and I get out of that session, and I call Sheridan, and I tell her, I said, I'm quitting my job. I'm quitting. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I told her, I said, I feel like this is what God said. And she's like, she's like, really? You just kind of got saved, a little over a year ago. You can't quit your job. And I'm like, no, this is what God said. And she's like, well, is it like a Joseph dream? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I don't. And so she kind of talked me off a ledge because I had a lot of growing to do, a lot of learning to do. And so we just decided that we would both have peace on it. But from that moment, I just knew that eventually I would give up my career for this calling. And so I just kept serving. And whatever the pastor needed me to do, I did. On Sundays, I'd hold doors, I'd greet people, hold signs, high five people. He taught me a lot about excellence. And the first thing you do is you make sure the house is clean, you check the bathrooms, and if they're not clean, and so he taught me a lot about excellence. And just even on the front of the church, like picking up trash, and so whatever he needed me to do, I just did. And as the student ministry kept growing, he comes to me and he says, I don't know what's happening with the youth side of the church. He said, but I want you to come help me with the adults. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he says, well, I want you to come be the executive pastor. And I'm like, oh, what? I had no idea context for it. And so he said, we'll figure it out together. And so I said, okay. And but I told him, I said, there's no way I can do youth ministry, raise these 4 kids, love my wife well, and help you on this side too. And so we just decided, let's transition out of youth, and then we would transition into that role. And so that's what we did. Whatever he needed me to do, growth track, next steps, teams, just whatever. And yeah, we were just helping him, serving him, and whatever he needed us to do. I was learning. I mean, I didn't have a teacher or anything like that in a sense, but every podcast I can get my hands on, every YouTube, I could watch about just church growth and leadership and building teams. I mean, I just became a student of all things church. And so we just were just running the play. And then we come into 2020, and this is probably about 6 years into just doing this. And 2020 comes, and my pastor just comes to me, and he's pretty much like, he's older, he's got a lot of businesses and does a lot of different things. And so when 2020 happened, he just said, I don't want to have to relearn everything, relearn the will. And so he would decide to transition the church to us at that time. And so May of 2020, we transitioned over. So I'm still full-time at the police department, and then he transitions the church. And so now we're now leading this thing in the middle, kind of the beginning stages of COVID. I guess maybe the middle. And yeah, still not getting paid or anything, just feel led to it, feel called. And then in a sense, my wife and I, we didn't want to really let the church die. We didn't feel like that was the call, is just to let what was. And so we transitioned it in May of 2020. And so we keep going on with the rest of the story.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now basically you've taken over the church, and you are the senior pastor, but you are also a police officer full time, and you need to make that transition. So you're eventually going to make the transition out of. So when did you decide to go ahead and just walk away from the police department?
Yeah. So at the time, I just felt like God wasn't, like I wasn't gonna. I knew somehow God would provide, but we just didn't know how. But I knew that I wasn't gonna leave the police department at the expense of my family. I just felt like that wasn't God's call financially. And we're Dave Ramsey people in our home, and so we knew that there were some things that just before we made that step, either God would have to have to be just very clear for us. And so when we transitioned the church it had $167,000 in debt, and that was probably my pastor's biggest hesitation, was that he said that he didn't want to give us a burden, but he wished he could give us a blessing. And so that was what was holding him on to still kind of leading the church, and prior to making that decision. And I just told him, I said, if it's God's will, God will provide. And if not, then we'll shut the doors and go serve wherever God's called us to serve. And so in that moment, he just had peace about it. We had peace about it. And so we would transition the church in the middle, kind of in the middle of that, not knowing if we were going to be able to pay the bills and what was going to really happen. But we just trusted God. And from that moment that we transitioned over as a church, we just started just tithing as a church and practicing that principle. And we just kind of became generous. And so, and it was crazy because there was not 1 month that we were ever late on anything. And so at the time, the elders were coming to me. They were like, "What are we doing different? How are we paying our bills now? And we didn't have no answer. It was just God was just providing. And just this, it gets really crazy. I felt like God said that we were supposed to be a debt-free church. And we're in the middle of COVID, but we just felt like we were supposed to start a debt campaign. And I mean, there was probably 20 people coming back when we started coming back. And so we felt led to jump in and do a debt campaign. And brick by brick was kind of what God laid on our heart. Brick by brick, God's going to rebuild the house. And so I told Sheridan that we were going to get some bricks as an illustration, and we were going to spray paint Isaiah 58:12 on each of the brick, and then on the other side $1,000, and we were just going to sell them for $1,000 a piece. And I had no idea she was going to get cinder blocks, so she got 167 cinder blocks, and I didn't know at the time if our platform that we had could hold all these cinder blocks. But me and about 7 or 8 different guys just went to Lowe's and with a couple trucks and got all these cinder blocks and took them back to the church. And that was really hard, though, to announce to the church, "Hey, by the way, there's this debt," and it was consumer debt that was used to do a build out on the church. And but we just knew I just felt like at the time that's what God called us to be debt free. And so in July of 2020 we start this debt campaign, and it was so hard, Pastor Rodney. Just like, God, is this really you? I mean, people are coming up to me. This is I mean, even at the time the elders were, this is crazy. I mean, people had left the church, and like I said, there was probably 20 people, and that's counting pregnant women and dogs and cats and everybody, kids, all of it. And but some people had left the church, and like, this is crazy. During the middle of a global pandemic, you're starting a debt campaign. I'm like, God, I feel like this is what you called us to do. I'm like, I don't know. But on the Sunday that we announced it, I felt like we were supposed to lead the way in generosity, my family. And so we didn't let him give that first Sunday. I told him, I'm not letting you give. I felt like we were just supposed to announce it. And so I didn't want it to be like an emotional thing and get the keys going and people just want to give because of that. But I wanted them to give because they felt like God, that's what God laid on their heart. But I told them, I'll never ask you to do something I'm not willing to do. And at the time, we had just gotten out of debt and we were building the savings. And so we had $5,000 in savings and in our personal account, and we emptied it out. And we bought the first 5 bricks as a family. And I told them, I'll never ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do. And so we did that. And then 10% of everything that was coming in, we just felt like we were supposed to give to somebody that was in the church. And so out of everything that was going to come in during this debt campaign, 10% we were going to give to somebody that was there. And so it was just it was scary, but it was really neat just to see how God was working, because sometimes we knew of certain needs and then other times we had no idea. And so like somebody would walk in and during a Sunday we'd have $187 to give away. And it blew my mind when people were like, okay, we want to buy a brick, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, God, maybe I'm not crazy. And I'm still a police officer, so the guys at work, they knew because they could see, social media. And so they were giving me a hard time, and what are you doing selling bricks? And so really I just felt crazy
in the middle of COVID.
In the middle of COVID, and I just felt just crazy all the way around. Sheridan and I both did, and but we just had to trust that we were hearing from God. But sometimes there was like one Sunday this lady walked in and we had like $187 that we had to give away that Sunday, and I just felt like it was for her. And I said, ma'am, I feel like I'm in the middle of preaching and I just see this person who's just like highlighting. I said, I feel like this is for you. and just handed it to her and just totally in tears because it was exactly like her light bill that she needed. And there was just there was several stories that were like that, like down to the dollar of what somebody needed. And there was no way we could have known, but only God knew. And so we're just doing it. And so now we come up to December. So that's July, August, September, October, November. So 5 months later. And in the beginning of it, I told Sheridan that it was going to be paid off by the end of the year. And I don't know, she probably thought I was crazy, but she never really said it. And so, because there was no way with what we had that it could have been done unless it was a miracle. And yeah, so we're going, and I had told probably 3 people, and that I was just had faith it was going to be paid off by the end of the year, the debt for the church. And so we're going into December, kind of year-end offering, and we felt like God told us to empty everything we had again. And like I shared, and she's the organization, the numbers, the budget, and so I told her I feel like this is what we're supposed to do. And I had been working a lot of overtime, and we were trying to build our savings back up. And Sheridan, she was actually on unemployment at the time, and so it was, and her unemployment was supposed to last until February, because of COVID. And so the week that I tell her we're supposed to give this amount, and she's like, that's it. We don't even have that amount. It'll have to be a miracle because we don't have that. And that's why I feel like that's what we're supposed to do. And so her unemployment was supposed to end in February, but that night that I tell her what we're supposed to do, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and she sits down on the couch and she starts with her journal. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I got to figure this out because I feel like that's what we're supposed to do too. And we're supposed to empty everything again. And so she's like, I got to work the budget. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to bed. And about an hour later, she comes in the room, turns the light on, Eli, and like scares me, startles me. I think something's wrong with the kids. I'm like, what's the matter? And she said, I just got an email that unemployment is supposed to end in Saturday. So then we're about 2 weeks out. So it's going to end the Saturday before we're going to empty everything out. So we hadn't bought Christmas gifts for the kids. And we were thinking she was going to have a check, still coming. And now it's supposed to end. And we just kind of looked at each other like, what are we supposed to do? And we just both knew. Now we know it's God. Because the moment that we make this decision to do this, now it's like there's this, felt like this attack of like, now what are you going to do financially as a family? And so we just said, God, okay. And we just agreed. And random thing, I ended up getting a bonus at work that I had never gotten before. And they say that at some point you should get this bonus if you never use your sick leave. And you just never know when the city's going to have the resources to buy back your sick leave. And it just happened to be this year. And so she sends me a screenshot of like that Friday of the bank account. We exactly have this amount with everything that, savings, checking. We have this amount of money. And it was more than the first time. And I said, praise the Lord, sent praise hands. And so we just went all in, and her unemployment ended Saturday. And I remember I'm working the streets that day, that Saturday. We're about to give that next Sunday, and I'm just driving around, and I'm just in tears. I'm crying. I'm just emotional because I'm just scared. It's like, I think a lot of times people think faith is not being scared, but it was like fear. It was like faith in the face of fear. And I think really it was because it was for my family, Yeah. It was like, well, what am I going to do about my kids and Christmas and is this really what I heard from God? And so I'm just driving around my police cruiser. I'm trying to keep it together, and so I texted the elders at the time, and I just said, I believe God's going to do a miracle tomorrow. I don't know how, but I believe. I just feel like God's going to do something amazing. And so all of them didn't. I think only one of them texted me back, and he just hit the thumbs up button on it, And so I was like really encouraged. But and so I texted them, and it was about 9:00 in the morning, and I had texted them that, and then an hour later, Sheridan had texted me, and then she tells me somebody from a church in Tulsa had messaged our Instagram, and I'm thinking it's somebody trying to hack our account, and it was Transformation Church, and she said somebody messaged us from there, and I'm like, how, like what? And she's like, well, I already messaged them back, and they want to FaceTime y'all tomorrow, and I just started crying, and I don't even know why, because I don't know what's going to happen, and so they had seen what had happened, or that we were in this debt campaign, and it was because Sheridan had randomly woke up one night, and I had no idea. I was like, how'd Transformation Church hear about us? And, we're just this little church in Lawton, Oklahoma. And she said, well, I never told you. And I said, never told me what? And she said, well, I woke up, and this was maybe a week or two before, I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I felt like God said, if you don't speak on behalf of the church as the mother, like who will? And so she knew that they were in a Crazy Faith series, and that they were doing this screenshot thing on their Instagram, and you screenshot it and you write what you're believing for. And so she just wrote that I have crazy faith that we're going to be a debt-free church, that God's going to provide. And that's it. And she goes back to sleep, and she never told me, and I never seen it. Well, at that same time, Pastor Mike was awake at that same time and sees it and goes through all of our stuff and looks at it. And so that's how they would find out. But yeah, so they would completely pay off the remaining portion of the debt, and that Sunday, and then on top of that, give additional resources, and they would say, this is so you can go and do what God has called you to do, and so yeah, so that's whenever I kind of knew God had provided for me to go full time, and yeah, just amazing, hard, like fear, faith, just trying to trust God, and just stepping out there. So
that's so good. So good. Now I've seen the video from that day. That was just thrilling to see how God used Transformation, Pastor Todd, and then you guys, your wife being obedient and taking that step, you taking the step of faith. Just, it's none of us are on an island to ourselves. All of us are working this thing together, and God is using your people, another church that you didn't even know the pastor, and to be up in the middle of the night and see what you guys are doing and say, I'm going to come alongside you and see what God can do.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Tell me just a little bit about today. I mean, you guys, this has been just a couple of years into the journey now, and God is just really multiplying. You're in you moved out of the church. You felt like God, you weren't going to stay there. You went, and you were kind of on a journey for many months of just like, where are you going to even meet? Yeah. And so you kind of relaunched, correct? Yeah. And so you relaunched the church. And when was that relaunch? And tell us a little bit about that.
So that was 2022. So that happened December of 2020, whenever we become debt-free as a church. And then after, I'm like, this is amazing, this is great. But it was like, we didn't really know what was really next. And so kind of like just a season of like, okay, God, like this happened. And so I guess it was April of 2021, I just felt like God said that we were to get out of the building, get back to the basics, and let him build the church. And so again, I think this is crazy. And just had to kind of go to some trusted guys around me. And we just kind of felt like we were supposed to just shut it down and go back to the living room and prepare for a relaunch. And so then that was hard again, because now it's like God did this amazing miracle. Now I'm going to tell these people. And I think really the big reason was because we knew we would rename, but in a sense the church it was 15, 16, 17 years old, but I knew in my heart that I wanted to build a life-giving church that I had went to, that I had experienced, like just like this life, like people excited about church, and I knew I wanted to be a part of a church that I wanted to invite my friends to, and so I knew we would just have to just break everything down and just kind of go back to the living room and really cast that vision and that culture, and so I announced that to the church, and hey, we're getting out of this building, and we're going to go back to the living room for a season, and we're going to prepare for a relaunch. And so we did that. And so we just started having like launch parties, interest parties. People started coming to the house on Sundays, and we just said, this is the kind of church we're going to be. And we would literally just practice, hey, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to walk in, and this is how we're going to greet on Sundays. And, if somebody asked, hey, where's the bathroom? We were going to take them to the bathroom, and we were just going to create this life-giving environment. And so we did that for about 6 months, and we're preparing for a launch in January of 2022. And so we had signed a lease with the school, and just that's where we were preparing to launch. And about a month out, they decided to pull the lease, and so we had nowhere to go. And so this portion just got crazy again. I just felt like, God, are you always going to ask us to do crazy things? And, feel like we're going to be out there on the ledge. And I just kind of felt like God's like a fifth quarter God, like an overtime kind of a God. And so we're meeting in the living room. We're preparing for the launch. We're supposed to go to the school. They pull it. And so the guys kind of around me were like, well, you should push the launch till September or next year. And I'm like, God, is this what we're supposed to do? And I just didn't have peace. I just felt like, no, this January 23rd, 2022, that's the date. And so we're meeting and we're trying all avenues. I'm still police. I guess I've left the police department. I'm driving around the city though. And I'm just like looking at random vacant buildings and just calling commercial realtors and, anybody I know that might have a space. And nothing just seemed to pan out. Nothing was happening. And I just had to have faith and just believe. And I just remember we're 2 weeks out from the launch and we're meeting on Sundays in my living room. At that time, we had grown the launch team to about 100 people and kids. And so like the kids' rooms were like, 5, 6, 7-year-olds and nursery. And I mean, the house was just crazy. The neighborhood people were complaining because all the cars parked outside in the cul-de-sac. And everyone's asking me like, where are we going? Where are we going to launch? Where are we launching? And it was really frustrating. And I'm like, because I had nowhere to tell them. And I remember it was the Saturday before, and I knew Sunday people were going to be coming over. And we had 1 week, and we had bought a trailer, and we had bought things to be load in and load out. And we hadn't had a chance to do set up or tear down. And we're trying to do the best we can in the house. There's some storage units by where we live, and so we were able to use a big like 20 by 20 storage unit, and that's where the worship team set up. And they were in a storage unit. And so we were just trying to do everything we could. And but that Saturday before, I remember I wake up early, and I'm just praying, I'm just talking to God, really crying. Again, I'm crying. I'm like, God, what in the world? Like, I felt like this is what you told us to do, and we have nowhere to go. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere to go. And I just felt like God said, well, can you have faith? And I'm like, yeah, God, I can have faith. I've seen you do amazing things. I can trust you like I can. I said, but what do I tell all these people that are going to show up at my house tomorrow? What do I tell them? And I felt like God just said, tell them when they ask, the Lord will provide. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I've heard you say that before. I read it in the Bible. And so I told them that Sunday, hey guys, we're supposed to launch in 7 days. And I don't know where we're going. And if y'all ask me, you text me, you call me and ask, where are we going? I'm going to tell you the Lord will provide. And it was like this weight just lifted off my shoulders. And it felt like the whole room, all these adults that were in this room, because we all had like this, it seemed like just this stress, this anxiety, like, and then whenever I tell them the Lord will provide, it was like everyone just was able to take a deep breath and like, yeah. Oh, you're right. This isn't on y'all. This isn't on us. It's on, like, okay. And, but we still didn't have nowhere to go. And so now we're leading to the week of, and it was the Friday. I had a friend that called me and said, there's this guy that heard about your situation. He just bought this 20,000 square foot warehouse because he owns a business near it and figures one of these days he'll need it. And he heard about your situation and said, if you could use it, or he heard about your situation, wants you to call him. And so I called him, and it was actually Thursday. And I called him Thursday, probably around 5 o'clock. And he said, hey, I bought this. I don't really need it right now. One day I will. He said, if you want to meet me over there and take a look at it tomorrow, I'll do that. And so we met him over there 8 a.m. that next morning, that Friday morning. it's just this big garage warehouse where they used to build cabinet doors. And he's like, it's not much, but if you want to use it, you can use it. And so we sent a mass text out to the team, and we said, hey, we got a place, and but it needs a lot of work. And so we pulled 2 all-nighters. It had no heat, no AC, and a bunch of sawdust. It was just a big garage, and that's where we launched. And that Sunday, 404 people showed up. It was just amazing.
Come on.
So,
Yeah, I remember this all too well. I remember hearing you and talking to you and asking you got the place yet? And you were asked that plenty of times, and to see God show up, that's great. And so you launched 400 people. God's been very faithful. A lot of times launches, they kind of regress a little bit, and then they kind of move back up. And you've had some strong growth, though. God's really just been continuing. I think those people for the 10 years that watched you as a police officer in the community, and they saw you live for Christ, they saw what God was doing, you being a youth pastor and now a senior pastor of a church, they're like, I want to go follow that guy. And so tell us now, God's really blessed. You're looking into this Easter. You guys are running over 600 on weekends, correct?
yes.
Bumping up towards 700 maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Getting more chairs ready for Easter?
Yes. Yep. So just trying to just manage the growth as best we can. Just grateful for your voice in our life and just all the wisdom during this whole season. Even during the launch, you would call me and encourage me and give me ideas and everything. But yeah, so we're just gearing up. We just bought 100 extra chairs, just preparing for that, and just making the team strong, getting people on team to serve that Easter. And so it's just been mind blowing to see now. I feel like all those small steps of just obedience and just stepping out in faith, not knowing what was going to happen, and going from 20 people to now what we're seeing and what we're believing for Easter, and it's just amazing. I even think about the space that we're in, 75,000 square foot building with, parking, space for the kids, and it's just absolutely mind blowing just to see what God has done in just this short time.
So tell those that are listening, you got the name of your church, how they can reach you. You got 2 experiences that you have every weekend. And tell us a little bit about, so if somebody says, hey, I'm in the Lawton area, or I know of somebody in the Lawton area that they can connect and send to your church, how do they find you?
Yeah, so we're on just Instagram, Facebook, and it's just the Church Lawton. And Sundays, 9:30 and 11. We have 2 experiences on Sundays. So.
Okay. Well, Eli, I'm so glad that I just wanted people to hear your story. I think it's very encouraging for me. It's a story of faith. It's a story of a lot of uncertainty, but that's what faith is about. I mean, if life was all certain, we wouldn't have to have faith. We have faith because life is uncertain. We put our faith in a certain God who's going to some way, somehow work it out for our good and for His glory. And so love and appreciate you very much, you and Sheridan. Just, would you do this? There's a lot of people listening right now that maybe they're going through their own struggle right now of faith. It could be a church planner that's watching this. It could be somebody just that's, working a job and struggling and just needing to follow God and the voice of God in their life. Would you mind taking a moment just to pray a prayer over individuals so that they would just learn to trust God, walk by faith, not by sight? Would you mind doing that?
I'd love to, Pastor Rodney. Yes. Dear Heavenly Father, God, I pray for the ones that are listening to this. God, I just pray that whatever situation that they're going through, whatever obstacle that is in front of them, God, whatever mountain that they see, God, we believe that you are bigger than all of it. That we may just see the mountain, but you see over the mountain. And God, I pray that even as we're tested, even as our faith is tested, God, Lord, that it would continue to make us stronger, that you would continue to grow each of them, God, whatever situation, whatever struggle, God, that you would help them to fully lean on you and trust in you, God, because I believe that's where you ultimately want us, is to always be dependent upon you, God. Lord, we're just so grateful for you giving us faith, for showing us, for leading the way, even as you gave your son Jesus in faith, in hopes that we would trust in him and we would accept him. God, I just pray for every situation, God, that they would look to you and not the situation, God. We're grateful for it, and we're grateful for you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Eli, thank you so very much. And again, for you that are watching us on Up and to the Right, I'm glad that you're joining us. Hey, share this with somebody. I believe it'll be an encouragement to them, and we will see you next time on Up and to the Right.